Among the Living. Well, that is the best Anthrax album, I personally think. But we are actually talking about Among the Living, the film. And this one is directed and written by Rob Worsley. And it's essentially a low-budget British zombie film. Now, what is the story? Well, Among the Living takes place at some point after a kind of a viral zombie type kind of infection. And ultimately, there's not much of humanity left. A few scattered survivors here and there, and it focuses on this guy who has a young sister trying to find some type of safe place to kind of like live out their days. Ultimately, they encounter a couple of other people along the way, one of which happens to be this older guy, and they sort of become kind of a a unit together, the four of them. And of course, they have to defend their lives from these zombie type creatures which have a distinct kind of like taste for human blood, and also other people out there who might want to cause them harm. What will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss Among the Living. So what can I say that works in this movie's favour? I actually kind of like the zombies in this one. Now, we don't see a hell of a lot of them. There aren't that many of them, but I kind of quite liked this style of them, because I like the fact that even a drop of blood can kind of, a bit like a shark, a drop of blood, they're kind of sniffing it out, which kind of made them, seem quite kind of have a unique way to hunt. They just kind of sniff out even a small drop of blood. And I quite like the aesthetics of these kind of like blacked out eyes and stuff like that. And they're not, I don't think, necessarily undead, but it's kind of more of a viral infection. But I actually found the concept of these kind of zombie-ish creatures quite interesting. I have to say as well, on a technical side, the movie's actually quite well filmed. It's an English movie that takes place mainly in this kind of countryside. I think it's put to good use. There are lots of sequences that make use of the kind of the natural environment, and I have to say it's filmed quite well. And on a technical level, things like the kind of sound design, lighting, handled pretty well. And the other thing I would say that I thought was reasonably well handled was some of the dialogue here seems very naturalistic. Now, this is a speculation on my part, but I feel like some of the kind of the dialogue scenes might have just been improvised by the actors, because it feels very, very naturalistic at times, especially some of the kids, the way they're kind of talking and stuff like that. They just feel like it's just kind of random kind of conversations, but kind of natural and kind of realistic in a kind of a more of a, not a flashy kind of movie style kind of style of dialogue, at least some of the time. But let's talk about now what doesn't work. Okay, let me just start with the biggest issue. There's not much plot in this movie. I mean, I was kind of waiting for the plot to kick in whilst I was moving it, but it really is just, a couple of people walking around in the woods, bumping into a kind of other people, and then kind of hold out in a couple of kind of buildings, and that's basically it. There's so little plot here. It's almost like it's a long first act of what I would have assumed be another movie. So if you can imagine, like, usually you have a 3-act structure in films, and the kind of the first act is kind of the setup. Generally, not a lot happens, not a lot in the sort of action and that sort of stuff. This feels like an entire first act of a movie stretched out to kind of feature length, because it feels just like a setup, really, rather than much kind of like payoff. So as such, it's virtually no plot in it. What we do have is lots of footage of this guy with a beard walking through the woods, which he goes off in multiple times for, and kind of doesn't repeat the same kind of scenes. He goes off in the woods looking for stuff. He runs into something, runs away from it, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. It's ultimately quite a dull film. Now, the zombies themselves, I don't think were used to good enough effect here. There's not enough of them. I don't feel like we're really trying to hide away from them. And then other times in the movie, you have people blatantly just kind of like kids just wandering alone in the woods, you know, out without the adults there, kind of quite easily could have run into these kind of things, whilst other times people are taking like massive precautions, and so it's kind of inconsistent. Now, I like some of the incidental dialogue, some of the kind of natural sounding dialogue, but there are some lines here that I feel are delivered a little bit more ham-fistedly, shall we say. I assume the lines that are more written and more structured, and the way the actors deliver this, I don't feel it was particularly kind of strong at times, although I'll be forgiving of that to a certain degree. I also have to say this world doesn't really look like it's a post-apocalyptic style kind of world. Everything looks there's no real damage to anything, everything seems perfectly in good condition. There's not even much in the way of kind of like dirt or kind of like wear and tear on any of our kind of characters. They just look like regular kind of folk just out in the country for a family jaunt. That's kind of what it looks like. So this movie ultimately it's one of these ones where I think it could have been a short film, but it just didn't have enough in it. There was virtually no meat on the bones, and I think some of the kind of the points that were done well, just there wasn't enough to it. So it's ultimately a little bit boring. In actual fact, I had to watch this movie in 2 sittings. I couldn't even sit through it in 1 sitting, so I had to just turn it off and then watch the rest of it the next day, because I was just like, I can't be bothered to watch the rest of it. It is kind of a dull film. So for me, this is a 3 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.